So welcome to Mental Health Monday, February 26, 2024. Our guest presenter today is Bill Mitchell. He's going to talk about crisis protocols in Northern Arizona. A little bit of history on Bill. He is a former military police officer with the Arizona Army National Guard and a retired patrol corporal with Coconino County Sheriff's Office. While with the Sheriff's Office, Bill recognized the need for more mental health training in order to help larger parts of his community. He attended several trainings to provide better level of service to his community, including mental health first aid, crisis intervention team, and suicide awareness, PTSD, in law enforcement. Bill was deeply involved with developing the police officers' new passionate in learning and training, as he was also an Arizona Post firearms instructor, a general instructor, and a less lethal instructor, assistant search and rescue coordinator, and full-time FTO. What's FTO, Bill? Full-time officer?
Field training officer.
Field training officer. Thank you. While at the sheriff's office and in the service, he was stationed at the Tusayan Grand Canyon district that covers approximately 7,000 square miles and utilized all his trainings due to the large patrol area he was assigned. He continues to teach even in retirement at the Northern Arizona Regional Police Academy and teaches resiliency, PTSD in law enforcement class. He's made an impact in his role with Arizona Complete Health, which is also, as we know, Care First, as a first responder liaison for Coconino and Yavapai counties. With this new opportunity, Bill gets to continue to use his knowledge, experience, and passion to help his community by coordinating crisis services for first responder agencies throughout Northern Arizona. And I'd like to just add that I've known Bill for a couple of years, just interacting through my role in with the coalition and his with the health plan. And it's really exciting to see people like Bill who have the passion and the knowledge that he brings forward on both the mental health side and the legal system. He's just the right guy in the right place at the right time. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Bill.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. So today we're going to be running through a little bit of information that I have passed along to Kathy and Lori about a new protocol that is new to the north. It is something that the southern counties have had for a time, but this is brand new information to all the northern counties of the state. And it's all encompassing what we're trying to get to for crisis services. And the way that we put this information together is really, it's just a guidebook of how crisis services operate. And this is the standards that we hold our providers to. Also, I have Amy Devins. She is my supervisor. She is here to be available for questions if you guys have those. But we're just going to, I'm going to share my screen and we're just going to look through some of this protocol. I know this is new information. This is not by any means the end all. I mean, if there's certain situations that come up that are outside the scope of this, obviously those are things that we can work through in real time. And through the crisis services, we do have real-time support 24/7, 365, where you can talk to either me or one of my team to get a problem resolved in real time. So let me share this. Okay, you should have it up on your screen there. So this is the Yavapai County 2024, and this is our most recent version of our crisis protocol. And if you haven't seen this document before, it's not a very large document, but it is encompassing all of the crisis services here in both Yavapai, Coconino, Navajo, Apache, and Mojave counties. So this is a very detailed document per county, but it's still, there's always room for improvement. So Every year we update this protocol and we elicit information from stakeholders, from community members, from providers that work within the crisis services to make this protocol more encompassing and more evolved as we get further into establishing different crisis services throughout the county. So it's, like I said, it's a very easy read. If you'd like a copy of it, I have sent it to Lori. I'm sure she will put it out with the information that comes back out to all of us. But it is very easy to read through, and it's, like I said before, it's simply just a guideline. Amy, did you have anything you wanted to throw in there?
Sure. Took me a second to come off of mute. So the crisis protocol is really intended, you'll see table of contents, overview and purpose, like it's an easy read. Our target audience for the crisis protocol is really to demystify what the crisis system is for our incumbent players, like our law enforcement partners, 911, emergency departments, like EMS, ambulance service, firefighters, our county attorney's office. They generally provide information around like Title 36 processes, because each county has a unique way of interpreting Title 36. Each county has a unique way of providing services to their communities. The standards should all be the same across the state. And one thing we've been working really heavily on is making sure that the 5 counties in the north have access to all of the same things that everybody in the south has access to. I can't really speak to Central because we don't oversee Maricopa County, but I can tell you we're very familiar with rural and frontier areas, and the vast areas that we have to cover. So we want to make sure that everybody understands what's available, and that it's easy to understand, because a lot of times you will hear potentially a specific provider type talking about something, and they're talking about the service that they can provide, and you'll hear maybe a case by case basis, or you'll hear, well, run me through that scenario. We try to take crisis as this really big safety net underneath everything else, so that everyone knows that they are entitled to crisis services, and what are those things, and what can you expect out of the system of care and the providers that are contracted to provide each of those service provisions under that crisis umbrella. That doesn't mean that providers aren't doing other things, because frankly, they're doing tons of other things. So sometimes it gets a little confusing when you hear like, well, ChangePoint this, or CBI that, or Hope this. They have lots of different service provision. This only addresses really that crisis nexus and what to expect. We have a really cool job. We get to work with all of these different partners. Most of the folks on this list, they're not contracted. They're system partners, so we can't compel them to do anything. There's no contractual obligation. Some of them obviously are, because they're contracted providers, but for the most part, we just have to build a system that works really well and listens and reacts appropriately to the needs of a community. So that's why we put this out there. I'll tell you one more thing. We have in the past, we've been doing this for, over a decade in the South. I'll say we used to try and publish this to our website. So every year we would push it out. This year I made a concerted effort to push it out to everybody on our Care First platform, as well as the Arizona Complete Health platform. And unfortunately, if we publish through our website, that would have to be something that goes through a very rigorous rewrite. And so we are choosing not to rewrite something that a lot of people have signed, because then it would be potentially materially different. So we don't want to do that. We're just going to share it in PDF form, grassroots wise, right? So share this as far and wide as you want, and refer back to Bill at any point, or me. We're happy to answer questions. And we almost feel like maybe that's a more personal hook to get people to reach out to us, because we really want to spread the word, right? So that's what we're doing here today. I'll turn it back over. I see your hand. Yeah.
And Bill, both of you. So I talked to Carmen Herrera yesterday or Friday. Sorry, I'm so confused what days. For about an hour about Northern Arizona, and one of the issues we discussed was emergency response. And evidently, you know, we're nationally known for our emergency response around the state, with the exception of Northern Arizona. And I told her about this protocol and said I would send it to her. And I really think you and Bill should be sending it to her so you can have any kind of dialogue. But my concern is, if it's not, it doesn't, this is a suggested standardization. I mean, everyone up here seems to want to do things their way. There is a lack of partnerships up here and working together. And so really, what does this protocol do
So
in that sense?
So it's not a legal and binding contract, but it does reflect the contractual obligations of our crisis providers. So if you're a crisis provider and you're contracted with us, the standards that we're talking about in here, with the response time, with the no wrong door approach, with service availability, live answer on the phone, like just a handful of those things, maybe those barriers that you've heard, those are contractual obligations, and that exists in the contracts with our crisis providers. If you're contracted as a crisis provider, this is a distillation of those contracts so that it's more accessible for the general reader, because we're not going to, I'm not going to expect a chief of police to read through everybody's contracts, right? Like, they're not going to go out to the Access website and look things up. They want us to provide it to them and like boil it down, give us the 10-cent tour. So that's what this really is. It's a easier to digest expectation. So similar to like the crisis system overview that we provide, the stuff in the crisis system overview, those slides match what's in this. These documents are, they support each other. There's nothing contradictory across. So this is more of the methodology of reference document, because if you print out the PowerPoint, it's not going to have the detail of, tell me about the mobile teams. What are the mobile teams doing? Who are the providers in my community? Tell me about the hospital assessment teams. What are they doing? What's the expectation? What's the phone number to call? That's going to be in this document. Does that help?
Yes.
So the way that I've phrased it, Kathy, is like this. It's just like a group of kids, they're going to a bowling alley and the balls just kind of go all over the place. What we are is we pull the bumpers up on the lane. We're trying to get everybody to follow within the same guidelines, within the same expectations. And this is simply that conduit to do that. It's trying to get, and those of us that are familiar with the North and how it's run for decades, there is no real boundaries. Everything is subjective. What we're trying to do is create this document, which is not all encompassing, and it's not you will do this. This is the suggested route. This is this is how we're trying to get everybody on the same page and start to play a little better on it. We're not even to the point where we can share toys yet. We're just trying to get people to where they can at least, this is the standard that we're trying to aim for. That makes sense?
Yeah, thank you.
And I will add, because we did take over as the Regional Behavioral Health Authority, now, we're going on a year and a half ago. In preparation for that change, we had to do a lot of listening, and we continue to do that. But I want to make it real clear that we come in with this idea that this is yours, this is your system, and we're just providing the providers with the opportunity to be funded in a way that actually allows them to have crisis service provision that is specific, right? That we're expecting our mobile team providers to be mobile team providers, and we fund them so that they can provide that level of care. It isn't an afterthought. Crisis is not And and this too. Crisis is its own real service provision. And I personally believe that anybody that's a crisis service provider should be treated. I mean, I'm very clear about the fact that I expect that the crisis system in general and crisis services will be regarded like an emergency service in my lifetime. We will think about crisis service provision in the same sort of thought that it's ubiquitous, it's for everyone. If I have an emergency, I can call and they'll help me figure out what my needs are. And the difference, though, I think, is that we're never going to expect our first responders, the traditional first responder, to be crisis providers. We've done that for decades. And I don't personally, I'm a former first responder. I don't want to do that. I want to make sure that professionals that have chosen this career path, that we hold them in high regard and build them up so that they can do this work and that they're funded appropriately to do the work. So that's kind of how we approach it. And like, I will freely tell you, like the folks on the phone, the people that are answering the phone at the crisis line, we have a standard that they are held to, but they actually also, enjoy the support because we have somebody dedicated on our team that's directly working with the crisis line provider so that it is the same, right? And that if you encounter a problem and you reach out and you escalate it, that we close that loop. That doesn't fall on deaf ears. If anything, it helps inform the system and we improve things. So it can be a little bit uncomfortable at first when, a new plan comes in, a new REBA comes in, and, there's a little bit of a shakeup, and we want to be extremely supportive through that process. But fundamentally, I'm concerned about the person that's calling or the person that needs help. That's where my focus is. And how do we get them the best care that they deserve, right? You should not be hearing false promises from us. We're very connected to making sure that the system functions appropriately and supporting our providers to get them to the place where they can provide that care.
Well, I do know that you guys have been around and talking, and I've had a feeling when I met both of you that if something could be done, you'd do it. And it looks like you're really putting that to work.
We're trying. I mean, we're only as good as the connections that we have to the communities that we're serving.
Yeah,
And
yes, I get that.
mean,
It's hard with a community that isn't real motivated to do a whole lot more than they have to do. George, you got a question?
Yes, thank you. I'm wondering if you could sort of summarize the current state for individuals who are affected by the abuse and fraud with the births, the substance abuse. You just were going by it here. And I saw a provider who has cut back what they're offering. I don't have a reason for that yet, but that'd be one. Just all the people that were made homeless or stateless. Please and thank you.
so let me make sure that I understand the question. You're wondering about, is this specific to our tribal communities and the issues that have occurred statewide, that fraud?
Well, I think that it's a misnomer. We at first thought it was the tribal communities, but it's the entire state.
Gotcha. Yeah, the criminal investigation into a lot of that.
Well, not the criminal investigation, but the effect on the individuals who, say, were kicked out of the hotel in Tucson. I think that was 200 people, but this affected 7,000 individuals.
Well, George, up here,
and-
we just had 2 drug rehab facilities closed. So, you've been very concerned about that. What is happening to those people? Is that what you're asking?
That's what I meant.
Yeah.
Yes, please. Thank you very much.
Gotcha. Yeah. So from a crisis perspective, I can't speak to anything outside of like our crisis service provision, because it just isn't my wheelhouse, and it would just be inappropriate for me to, you know, pontificate about what's happening. We can get you connected with the right folks and on our plans, with regard if they're Arizona Complete Health or their Care First, and what we're doing with our members from a crisis service position. You know, we're always there with a safety net. From a housing perspective, if there's some specific concern that we need to dive into, if there's a specific footprint that we're looking at, just drop us an email. You've got our contact information. We'll make sure we throw it in the chat, and we can research it and figure out if there's something that maybe there's a gap. So again, I don't want to speak out of turn because it just wouldn't be appropriate. It may be something that, like my colleague Tanya Long Gervais might be more appropriate for to answer, or it may be something more with our housing folks. So I can't really answer it off the cuff for you because it's just not, it's not my wheelhouse.
Sure.
Okay.
Let me suggest, and not in any way that's rude, because I know you and Bill have been thoughtful and come before us before, that as recent as 6 months ago, the word from advocates on the Indian Nation was, and this word was given to Access, Care First is not doing enough. And so I'm asking 6 months later.
Sure, George. I guess I would still just put this back to you and say, if you can give me the opportunity to respond, we'll get you connected to the right person to answer it. I'm just not the right person. I don't deal in anything outside of crisis system operations. So I can talk to you about mobile team response. I can talk to you about crisis line service provision, Title 36, you know, any of the services that connect into crisis service. But past that, I'm not the expert in it, and I freely admit it. So I can get you that person to maybe answer. Maybe that would be a good topic for the future. Get you guys somebody from the plan that maybe is working on that specific issue.
And Amy, I think this is where a lot of us are confused, because I got a call from down south, from someone that works in the system, and they were asking the same question as George is, and assuming that it was a crisis issue. When you have people, and I'm hearing this from all the plans, they're identifying their people. And so I understand that many of these people are outside the system. So who really is dealing with them? And those that are in the plan, isn't this a crisis situation? In the sense that, you know, they're in treatment and all of a sudden they're out in the streets. I mean, so I'm just trying to understand your response to it.
Well, I guess
Like everything's so departmentalized, or
no, it's more about if you have, I mean, if you have a specific issue that you want an answer to, like I wouldn't expect somebody to come in from UM and talk about crisis service provision because it's not
Okay.
what they do. So I'm
Okay.
thinking that maybe this is probably being addressed by one of my colleagues, that I'm not involved in their day-to-day plans, operations, what they've funded, what they can talk to you about with the transition for members, or that, you know, the non-19 population, maybe a difficult to serve population. Yeah, I mean, are we providing care, and should there be that dialogue? Yes, absolutely. I'm just not the right one for you.
Yeah.
As much as I want to fix everything in the whole wide world, I don't have that scope or ability. So I have to rely on my colleagues. So if you give us the opportunity, if you want to drop us a quick email that I can then connect to the right folks, we'll get you connected to the right folks. And you guys
And-
know, I mean, we're good for it. So
Yeah, there's no problem.
And
we'll
just
get you
throwing
the
the
right-
information out that if it's still part of an active investigation, there may be some different folks that are responding to different matters with additional people that have been in transition through this investigation. And those teams, like Amy was speaking about, those teams we don't have a connection to. We are still focused on community provided crisis services. If that's tied to an investigation, that could be a completely different team, and that's what Amy's trying to speak to.
Sure.
And we can get that additional information.
And I guess
Well-
we're not concerned about the investigation, we're concerned about the individuals. Go ahead,
Right.
George, sorry.
Oh, well, I thought since you're here and you've been so thoughtful, that I would just ask, how is the fentanyl epidemic in northern Arizona?
Again, that is outside of our scope.
Oh, you don't do the substance abuse, just a couple pages up in the,
We tie in another team, which is ran by Tanya Long. They do substance abuse, and that is kind of their, again, like Amy was talking about wheelhouses. Everybody's got their specific group of things that we can address and take care of. Again, with the substance abuse stuff, that comes from a different team as well.
There are programs that are
Oh.
attaching, if you're talking about like our crisis encounters that have a nexus to substance use. We do keep track if somebody self-identifies in their crisis episode, if they're talking about their experience, and we can look at the reason for the call, the reason for a crisis mobile team dispatch, and we can aggregate that information. We share all of this crisis information, crisis data. We can absolutely pull out those trends and provide like last quarter's data, and we're coming up on our next quarter's data being compiled right now. So we're kind of closing out because of the month we're in. We're getting close to, midway through the second quarter of the contract year. So we look at it month over month. We look at it by a quarter at a time. And through the lens of those encounters that are coming through the crisis system again, we can pull out anything that has a substance use nexus, but we're not, unless they're actually identifying in their crisis episode themselves that this was a fentanyl encounter, we wouldn't be knowledgeable about that. So I think maybe to Bill's point, I think Tanya Long Gervais, who's our grants administrator, she specifically works and has folks that work specific in the realm of substance use, and fund the programs around supportive responses for substance use. She may have more data to respond to a question like that. I mean, and anecdotally, I'll just say, yeah, I mean, we know fentanyl use is absolutely running rampant, and it's extremely worrisome. But we're happy to, I mean, truly, we're happy to share any of the crisis data. We can pull up last quarter's report if you want to see that. Bill's got it.
So,
Yeah.
okay, so Suzanne Legander is raising a really good question, and I think part of it is her concern, and she says, this seems to be so compartmentalized at Care First that it feels like the public facing staff are not able to answer a lot of questions. Seems like there needs to be some overlap knowledge. And so what I'm trying to understand is, you guys, when I talk to you, you've had very specific information on a one-to-one basis to refer me and do all that. This plan is kind of an overall plan, and this presentation is really not meant to, is more to show a way for us as a community to work together and some standardization that's there. Help me with this. I think Suzanne is sharing my confusion a little bit.
So the last thing we want to be is confusing. The crisis protocol, if that's what we're talking about, the crisis protocol is intended to be a distillation of all of the crisis service contracting, all of the expectations on providers. It's supposed to be an easy to navigate roadmap that we then share with and collaborate with our non-contracted providers like law enforcement, fire, EMS, emergency departments, even anybody that's really in that community facing emergent situation where they need to be able to reference, all right, what do I expect out of this crisis system? It's kind of the new kid on the block compared to all of us. 911's been around for years and years and years. Same with our police force. Like, we know what to expect to a certain extent out of that type of service. What they don't know is what to expect out of the crisis system. We include additional information because we've been asked questions around, all right, well, what about substance use? What about this? What about who's doing this service provision in my community? That's why we include that information in this document. It doesn't mean that I oversee that part or Bill oversees it. If there's additional questions about anything that you tease out of this, then we can connect you with the folks that are managing that specific segment. There is no way to have me or Bill be the expert in every single program that Care First is responsible for, funding, overseeing, contracted to provide. I don't have superhero strength or mental capacity at this age. I just don't. I would love it, but I don't. So we rely on our colleagues, and we're happy to connect the right folks in that have those questions and that can answer those specific things. And I think it's a great forum that you guys have to be interactive. So if there is an area that you really want to know about, truly drop a line over to Bill, drop it over to me. We'll get you the right person in the next meeting, or a dialogue going through email, or just a phone chat. I mean, that's how we've all become closer. So this document is really intended to be kind of a giant cheat sheet around crisis, because most of the experience so far has been, that's not how it runs for us. That's not what happened when I called the crisis line. That's not the crisis line number I called. That's not, the mobile team told me no. The outpatient provider said they're not a crisis provider. When I hear that those are barriers, that's why we want to try and keep this as simple as possible, but also informative. So it is not intended to be a 150-page contract. It really isn't. We don't want that.
Ralph,
Yeah, I'd like to just say my compliments on what you've done. This, for example, in a NAMI family support group, we get questions that, people are having trouble with the system. And so while this is not contractual level, this is very helpful, I think, to people like us, for our folks in NAMI, to be able to go to a page in this and say, look, here's a starting place. It's sort of like, what was it we used to talk? There was a name for things like, if you didn't have time to study for your midterm, you went and you got the
Cliff Notes.
Yes. Exactly. That's what this, and the fact that, the combination of the two things, the slideshow, which we've all seen before from you folks, and this, they're a good pair together. That, again, helps us in the community to explain. One other comment, fentanyl and its impact on the community. Within Navajo County, we have Vicki Solomon's group, very active in the area of drug issues. And yes, it's a crisis. It's beyond a crisis. It's killing lots of people. She's very involved with law enforcement across Navajo County. That doesn't say a thing about Coconino or Yavapai or even Apache County next door. But she employs people, actually, as opposed to NAMI, where we're all volunteers at this level. She employs people that go around and are talking about drugs and about family matters and family care and things like that across Navajo County. So if anybody wants to know what's going on in the drug system, if you will, in Navajo County, Vicki Solomon is the best contact that I can suggest. That's all I have.
I see a question in the chat. I think the protocol's a great amount of information. My suggestion would be to change the title from Yavapai to Northern Arizona. We won't do that because we have 5 separate crisis protocols, one that's unique for each county. So if you want the crisis protocol for, say, Navajo County, you can have it. If you want the Apache County crisis protocol, you can have it. Where we can keep them exactly the same, we do. But the uniqueness of each county really dictates that each county gets its own crisis protocol, because truly, things are done differently. As much as we can keep things uniform, we also have to kind of tip our hat to the unique characteristics of each community, the providers that are there, and honestly, the way that the county behavioral health, county attorney's office are doing their operations and interpreting statute. We definitely have to be mindful of that. So we hit up and we push hard. Bill pushes hard to get the information so that we can put it in these documents from our key partners. Sometimes we don't get a lot of interaction or response, and that's okay. These are living documents. We update them every single year. We put out the first one at the 6-month mark, and then we got everybody on the calendar year. Every county we publish at the end of the year for the beginning of the new year. That doesn't mean that the system doesn't evolve over the year. It just means that we publish once a year. Otherwise, we would be just changing this thing all the time, right? And you wouldn't know which version. So if there's ever a question about something, if you're like, hey, a new statute just went into effect, or legislation came out, you'll see that we've got some legislative updates that are in here, but they're not. We don't go into like a legislative update type legal document. We just want to like point people to the right place, like application for involuntary evaluation. That's the MH100 form. If you need to like keyword search something, you can also go into 36.520 and you can pull out that information. So we're kind of pointing people in the direction rather than, being really, we don't want to regurgitate everything, right? We just want to use it like Cliff Notes.
And you will see sections on them that are similar, but I can tell you from firsthand experience in dealing with Yavapai County, there is some very uniqueness to Yavapai County that you will not find in any other part of the state. So it's different than White Mountains, different than Mojave County. It's just different. So getting all of those folks, again, going back to getting everybody on the same page, getting the people from within county government to understand the protocol is great. Getting them to have additional feedback or buy into it, that's my goal. So getting the process down for Yavapai County, being this is brand new, never been used in the community in this way. It's an all-encompassing process, and it's a lot of meetings, it's a lot of talking, it's a lot of communication back and forth to get this to happen. This again is just that go-to reference material. It's not designed to be the gotcha moment, but this is a place to start, and it's like that throughout all of the counties that we cover.
Thanks, Bill. I'll
And-
also tell you, we've got a crisis, or we've got a liaison dedicated. Obviously, Bill is Yavapai and Coconino. We've got Allison Hefner in Navajo Apache, and we've got Keith Francis in Mojave. So and I can give you the folks in the South. If for some reason you all are covering something in the South and you want to, touch base on what's happening in Santa Cruz County, just again, let us know. We can share whatever protocol you want. You can have all of them. You can use them as your nighttime bedtime reading. I mean, whatever you want. You could print them and start a fire with them. We'll keep sending them to you.
So I was just going to share that with everyone that I tried to get the Cherry Fire Association at least to read this protocol, to ask questions, and I imagine this is indicative of the resistance you're meeting at a much higher level. But these people are afraid. They think that it's going to put more work on them. They don't understand how it's going to apply to them. And so they're not here today, and it's real frustrating. You just have to keep pushing to get any kind of ownership. And that's what they don't want, I guess, at all levels.
We kind of view it as a train, and we're on the same track, and we're going to do this big loop. And at each platform, every stop, more people get on the train. And eventually people are going to be standing on the platform going, why am I not on that? Why is everybody jumping on? So I don't view that as defeat. I've been doing this now, I'm in my 9th year. It was very rough at first. I love a rowdy room. I love people that push back and have ideas and challenge us, because truly that's how we make things better. We don't sit off somewhere and not interact and not come up with new ideas. Some of the best programs and best ideas are born from people's ideas that, you know, they've experienced frustration themselves. They want better service. So eventually we get everybody on board, or I mean, they're just going to be left on that platform while we're all trucking along on the train. So that's the easiest way I can think about it in order to keep us motivated, because yeah, we do get a lot of pushback. We do get a lot of no. We get a lot of maybe some anxiety from some of our system partners. There's some myth that's out there that we have to bust. You know, there's definitely stigma. So we're up against it. But again, that's what we signed up for, right? Like the outcome of this is that if we each day one more person gets better service and we intervene earlier rather than later, then my God, we've done our jobs. I mean, you know, when I hear things like, well, it wasn't that big of a crisis, we didn't want to bother you. My God, please don't ever think that. At the first inkling that somebody needs additional support, yourself, a family member, a third party in the community that you just see that needs something, please have them call. Because to me, that is starting somebody on the right path. And I just hate when I hear, well, you know, well, it takes too long, we're too far away. I'm like, please, a lot can be done by phone. We can do so much to help somebody telephonically while a team is coming out in person. And not everybody wants a team to come out to them. They don't want a car in front of their house. They don't want to go to a facility. And that's okay. I mean, our crisis folks can stay on the phone with somebody, and a lot of service can be opened up to them just by phone. So if fundamentally that's the message that we put out there, that's what I want to resonate. And we do that a lot with our first responders. And, you know, Bill and I both have that experience from being first responders, that the silence around your own wellness can be so devastating. So, you know, we freely talk about exposure to, you know, traumatic events and what happens to first responders and anybody working in frontline professions. So if we can be peers from that perspective, you know, we're happy to do that. So.
Very good.
So that is it in a nutshell. Any other
I think-
questions?
Do we have any? So I think you operate very much like we do on a grassroots level. We raise issue and we just keep plugging at it until, you know, it takes a life of its own. But the other thing that Ralph is sharing is it would be nice to be able to send this out to most of the volunteer organizations that we're associated with. I think, you know, to me, my support groups, this would be very, very helpful for. And I get so many calls from out of state, probably at least 2-3 calls a week about people that have loved ones that don't understand our system. And I never thought about sending this to them.
Yeah, this is a great resource for those folks. And this protocol is known far and wide. I've talked to other people in different states, and they've known of the protocol that the South of Arizona has done. So this is definitely something that, as expanding it, bringing it to the North, it's just going to reach that much more of an audience.
And yeah, share it. I mean, truly share it. The only thing I'll say is when you do share it, just make sure to stress the first piece, the first place to start is call the crisis line. I mean, truly, if we can tell anybody anything, it's start with a call to the crisis line. And certainly if there's something operationally that you need support with, or you're like, something went sideways, you can refer them to me, Bill, or the other two liaisons that Bill shared their contact information. But if you go to the wrong person, it's okay. We talk to each other all day long, every day. So we'll get you to the right place.
I guess we're just not that used to this community to that kind of response. Suzanne, did you have any more questions? Suzanne? Ralph does. Suzanne is the CEO of Star, and they have a facility up here. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it. But I guess she's on a telephone call. Go ahead, Ralph.
Yeah, I was wondering whether Amy and Bill have any prognosis on when this 988 becomes, what do they call it? You know, so that if you're using an out-of-state phone, it has to go through the system right now to get to actually to the mobile team, but they're working on that. What do they call
The
that?
the geolocation piece.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're working on it. It's
Any
a big
idea?
undertaking. I'll say if all you can remember is 988, or
Yeah.
you know, maybe you don't have service on your phone, but it will dial 988, then use it. The only thing I want folks to know is that yeah, if your phone number originates outside of Arizona, you will be routed to whatever call center is closest to that area code.
Right.
So if somebody's experiencing a crisis and they don't know where they're at, maybe they're traveling on the highway and they're not sure, because you know, sometimes you're on the highway and you don't know exactly where you're at, or the crisis is making it so that it's hard for them. They can call 988. They will get routed eventually to the right place. There is a phone tree at the beginning of it, so you do have to listen to the press 1 to do this, press 2 to do that. The crisis line, the 844-534-4673, the statewide crisis line number, doesn't have that. If you're anywhere in the US and you call our statewide crisis line, you're going to get routed to our crisis line provider, Solari. 988 will eventually get you there, but it can be a minute, right? It can take a minute. I know the feds are working on it. There is if you're not familiar, there's it's on Wednesdays. It's called the Crisis Jam. I don't know if you've ever heard about the Crisis Jam. It's a actually global thing. Folks coming in from all over actually the world join this call on Wednesdays. If you look up 988 Crisis Jam, you can probably get on that invitation. I think they've tightened that invitation. I know that I've seen, like, you got to jump through a few hoops to get in that room. But it's a good platform to listen to what those innovations are across the country. And then, you know, potentially ask those questions, because you will get some of the federal folks that are overseeing 988 operations at that level on those calls. So just a thought.
The answer to my question is, we don't know.
Correct.
We don't oversee that part. I mean,
Yeah, I understand. Just
I
thought maybe
wish.
information. Allison talks about it, you know, when she does presentations.
Yeah, I wish that I wish we had more say. We are getting more data though, a little bit better data sharing agreement between the 988 function. So at first it was a little bit rough because you know we don't have necessarily the rights to see a lot of that information. That has softened a little bit. We're getting better communication across from the 988 calls and the statewide calls. So I mean, there's definitely improvement. I know just from a colleague, a personal experience where we were trying to help somebody that was out of state. And it was a struggle. When we asked for mobile team response in another state, they were like, what's a mobile team? We don't have that. So that is where the 988 conversation is prompting communities to go. So yeah, the crisis line is great, but what's the response component? And some states and communities, you know, across the country definitely still rely on, we're sending an ambulance or we're sending a police officer. Usually it's a police officer. So for what it's worth, the 988 function nationally is raising that water level and awareness around availability of a crisis service provision that is a response provision, and not saying, hey, coppers, we want you to do this. as well as, go to police calls.
Of them will be stand on the platform forever. We know that.
I know.
And, we do get these things from out of state. Within the last month, we had a father in Maryland calling about a daughter who was in a care situation in Flag and going to be released into our community here. So a peer, she is a peer, and has been, I've talked to her several times since then. But yeah, these numbers my number is a Valley number. It's been my number forever, and I'm not going to change it. But
Yeah.
hopefully.
I think we'll get there, honestly. I mean, again, I have to be optimistic. I choose to be extremely optimistic and think, 7 years ago, 988 was just a thought, and now it's operationalized, and now we have the opportunity to see it improve. And, I'm very much on board with that.
So Suzanne, I was just asking if you had any more questions. I did explain to the audience that you're the CEO of a peer-run organization in Maricopa and then up here. And I wondered if you had any questions or any need to engage with the speakers.
Sure. So I put into the chat box the request to get the 5 different northern counties crisis situation so that we know who to serve or who to redirect people to in the proper county. We are in Flagstaff. I'm not sure how much, though we do the telehealth. So we could be seeing people in other parts of the northern Reba. But it would just be helpful for us to have those resources. Same with my counselor who's been on the call to know where to go to. And I know we don't have funding for non-Title 19 SMI for this year. And I don't know if we will in the future, but where do we send people that are calling us for help so that we know where to refer them to rather than them having to jump through a bunch of hoops? Thank you.
Yeah, if you can drop your email into the chat, I can send you the 5 counties, no problem. And then Amy, if you want to cover that last piece.
So this is Lori. I just want to say something about who to contact, and it doesn't matter where you are.
Susan had another
Oh, I'm
part of
sorry.
her question.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Amy
Suzanne.
was going to answer the other part of her question for Susan.
Go ahead.
Yeah, if you're looking for like a connection point and making a referral for SMI population.
No, for the non-Title 19, she was asking if they're requesting services and she doesn't have anywhere to refer them to. Is that right,
Gotcha.
Suzanne? Go ahead and ask your question.
Yes, I just, people are coming to us who used to have our services in the Phoenix area. They've moved up to Flagstaff. They were really excited, but they're non-Title 19. And so all I know is the Flagstaff Guidance Center, but I don't know if they don't want to go there, what other non-Title 19 funded locations are there to choose from.
Gotcha. Yeah. What I would say is the first stop is you can refer them to the crisis line. That's a great place to start, even though it seems like, well, it isn't really a crisis. If somebody's coming from out of county, out of region, and they need help and you don't know what they're qualified for, I think a good place to start is truly a call to the crisis line. They can call crisis and say, hey, I need help. I don't know how to navigate. I don't know if I'm eligible or not. So that is always appropriate. And then we'll figure out eligibility and get them routed to appropriate care.
Okay, so our people know their SMI, they know they're non-Title 19. They just need to know which agencies they can go to for the service. Are you able to give us the names of those agencies? Again, so that we can do a warm handoff rather than to the crisis line, which just is not a warm handoff.
Okay, so I also would probably tell you, I think having them, do they have their login? Do they understand? Like if they're SMI population, then there are members. So I mean, have they ever engaged with the plan? I mean, it's a hypothetical question that I
Right,
guess.
I don't know. So the login, every one of them has a unique login, and how do they get that?
I would recommend that they reach out to the plan and they start engaging, they start engaging with member services. It sounds like this is more of a, like, what are they eligible for? Who's providing care? That you can look it up as a provider, they can look it up themselves. It should be pretty easily navigable if they're engaging with the plan. And you have my contact information. Maybe we can set some time to just go through this in a little bit more detail, and maybe there's something more
Right,
specific about it.
I'm used to more customer service where we help guide a person through the process rather than just have them call this phone number and good luck. Where, we go, okay, here are the 3 choices that you have. Here's their phone numbers. Would you like us to help you, walk through that process?
It sounds like then you need some additional provider support, and we can probably set that up. So I'll strongly
Great, thank
suggest
you.
that you reach out. I actually am a couple minutes late to my next meeting, so I'm going to have to jump off. But you have my contact information. We can set something up and work through that. Okay. I want you guys to have the
Perfect.
support that you need.
Thank you very much. I'll do so. And I also have to be on another call right now, so I'm going to log off unless someone else has something else if they need for me.
No, thank you, Suzanne.
And thank you, Amy, also.
Certainly. You guys, I'm sorry I have to jump. If something comes up, you got Bill. He's better than me anyway. So hit me an email or give me a holler, okay?
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Amy.
So I don't know if you had another question, Lori, but one thing I'd like to pick Bill's brain about, I think we're all very interested in PTSD and the impact. We feel very strongly as a community that this is an integral part of our illness. Either it's a cause or it exacerbates it. And it's interesting, you work with the officers, and yet they have so little understanding of PTSD on our level. I mean, I know that I historically, I mean, it hasn't happened recently, but where I've actually run from officer because of PTSD, and it was their reaction. So maybe you could share a little bit what you're doing to help educate that area.
So the average person in the span of their lifetime will see 3 major traumatic incidents. An officer sees at minimum 10 a day per shift. So that's a lot of cumulative trauma that they absorb, and vicarious trauma that they pick up from others. So what I've really gotten into being able to present to the academy and to new first responders in general. A lot of fire and EMS folks have also picked up some additional information from my trainings that it has to start at the beginning. You have to understand that you're going to get these things. And I had one very young EMT came up to me and said, "Well, it's like catching cold, right? Everybody gets it." No, it's how you mitigate and respond to the traumatic incidents that have evolved over natural course of life. But the difference is with first responders, they don't recognize the signs or symptoms because they're too enthralled in trying to help people of their community, trying to be that helpful support and be the strong standing point for everybody in the community to go to. But it becomes detrimental to that officer or that first responder in a very short amount of time. And they lose compassion, they lose empathy, they lose caring and feeling for what they started out to do the job for. So I use my abilities and the skills that I've acquired and some of my hardships that I've been through. Some of you may know my oldest son was a flag PD officer. He passed away, ended up taking his life from an on-duty incident, which was the incident itself. He knew in his mind that the incident was justified. but it was the vicarious trauma of the things that had happened to him post trauma that really ended up becoming the catalyst for his end. So I take his message and I move it forward and make sure that folks understand that it's a cumulative effect. There is usually a tipping point, but it's usually when that bucket is full. So I go around and I talk to different agencies about how to get that bucket dumped and what is the best way and approach for officers to handle vicarious trauma and cumulative stress that can occur from their hazardous career choice. So that's been my passion, and I've actually moved that through the community in a lot of different ways. I've had other office groups that have asked me to come in and speak because they've had a number of deaths. I've had school districts that have asked me to come and speak because of the compassion fatigue and just the sheer volume of things that happen in the community that school teachers see. So I've been able to use my messaging to get through to several different groups and explain to them the usefulness of happy, healthy ways of relieving stress, and understand that it's going to happen. It's just a matter of how you mitigate those. I've talked at department levels about how to encompass officer well-being, total person, mind, body, spirit, which is something that when you go into the police academy or go into any kind of first responder academy, they don't spend a whole lot of time talking about that. And then you're expected to do a 20+ year career where you see that stuff on a regular basis. So I use the information that I have acquired over the years. When I first went to mental health first aid, it wasn't even called that. It was the mental trauma you received. And that was in Salt Lake City back in 2009, before it really became anything national. So I was starving for information. I used my ability to get the information and bring it back and spread it to others. And I continue to do that today.
It's very, very important. It's for all populations. I mean, each population has its own uniqueness and that exacerbates it. And it's ironic that our communities can't have a little bit of understanding of each other. And that will come. It does slowly.
Yep. And it's a hard topic for some to even approach. A lot of people don't like to deal with the inevitable, but it's something that we need to discuss more as a community rather than the inward conversation that you keep having with yourself and getting nowhere about. That's what I really project forward is having the open conversation, open communication about the true things that lurk in the shadows of the mind, and how to best get those out in an appropriate manner.
Right. Yeah. Lori, I think this is something, as a community, Bill, we started talking about trauma-informed care and all that. It hit when I was more at the health department. And we did a whole lot as a community and as a state, and it was a big thing. And it's kind of dropped off. I mean, there's discussions about being trauma-informed care, but people seem to have forgotten. I mean, we were reaching out to therapists that would say they'd break down and cry, and they'd say it's so traumatic, where I work. I have a mental illness, or it's traumatic where I work and how that impacts, the work with their clients. But I just think we've in many ways left that behind. And the ability for people, I mean, I think Lori and I mean, most of us that are now leaders are here because of the trauma. I mean, that is our way of dealing and our continuous healing.
Yep. And it's a process. I've tried to explain to people the resiliency and why I continue to work. Yes, I'm retired. I was able to retire young, but I still feel like I have a purpose and a mission to drive some information forward. And I think that's what we're supposed to do. As we gain the information and we gain the experience, we're supposed to push it forward so that others know and can change some of their patterns of how they absorb that trauma or stress. So it's an all-encompassing community issue, and like you said, it is cyclical. It does, whenever there's a big community event, you see this real push or swing for mental health awareness training or mental health resilience training. And then I keep pushing and pushing because it's not just the bad times, it's the good times too, because it's just like the roller coaster. The ups are going to have downs. And if you're not equipped on the downs, you're going to lose more people. And that's what I want to see. I want to see stop.
And it's funny, but it's not really funny, but this whole thing with Israel and the Palestinians and the captives, and for some people, that raises alarms. It raises a lot of trauma, and no one can understand how you can be upset because of what is happening in Israel and with Hamas and everything. People don't get it. So you just kind of go on with your life. But if they were more educated and knew that they could reach out and that this is real, I mean, that's why you're so upset. And, it just brings back so much for so many people.
Yep. And there's healthier ways to deal with it than how people go about it now. And that's what I bring.
Exactly. Yeah. So maybe, Lori, this is a big issue down the line.
Yeah, and I think that, the trauma-informed care, health homes are using community reinvestment funding for specialized training for their staff. There's trainings on it and on Relias. But I think that for us in our community, this is a topic we can certainly be addressing in a future Mental Health Monday. But back to the crisis protocol, and your presentation today, Bill, one thing is the phone number. There's a 24-hour crisis line, and that works everywhere in the state of Arizona. It doesn't matter who your health home is or who your health plan is. You call that number, and they're contracted with the local line in your community. So the variations from one place to another, this transcends that. I always encourage people to use the state number because there's a tracking on that. If something goes sideways, I can still call my local crisis server provider in my community, but they don't have the tracking and the oversight if things go sideways. Any call that comes into the state line is recorded. There's tracking. You can follow up. If I use your state line and you send me to my local crisis responder and they fall short on any level, I can call you back and say, here's when it happened, here's who I am, or here's who the person that is involved is, and there can be action taken to find out what went wrong and make it better going forward. Just going to your local number, you can still do that. But like I said, I always encourage people to use that state number. The other thing I have is, you mentioned that there are differences in protocols because of the autonomy between one county and another. What can you cite as an example that would make one unique that wouldn't be in another? Just off.
The Title 36 process is different from county to county. The Yavapai County Attorney's Office, for example, they don't oversee the Title 36 process. That's all done through Polera. That is the only county that I've come across that has that much ability to affect Title 36 within their county. Coconino County has a modified version of that. And some counties have, it's never the same for every county in how things are processed. And that's okay based on the fact that each county is set up differently in that respect. But what I am trying to focus on or get a baseline on is having services available in every county that are responsive. So what does that look like for Yavapai County? Because there's always that separation. There's the north side of the county and the south side. There's what's on the Verde Valley side versus what's on the Prescott side. So there is that separation, and believe it or not, within the county, those two operations have worked independently for a long time, even though they're under one umbrella. So getting the same, even within the same county, getting the same services set up is different than in some of the other counties. So that's where a lot of the variations change from county to county, is usually within that county government.
Thanks, that makes sense. Anybody else have questions or comments for Bill or on this topic?
No, I appreciate. Hello, Kelly. Kelly showed up. Kelly, did you have any questions? You always have a question.
Me?
Yes.
Um,
The
yeah.
reason I contacted you about this meeting is because your connection with the statewide independent living
Council?
yes, and I'm sure Bill is aware of it, but maybe you could just share a little. And she is going to be going, I guess you're the head of the program is going to be going to the next Yavapai, what is it called?
Code?
Mental Health Coalition.
Yeah, yeah. So Kelly, you want to just share a little bit about what we do as in response to emergencies?
You mean with AZ Silk or just in
Yeah, are
general?
you familiar with that, Bill?
Vaguely.
The Arizona Statewide Independent Living Council is a nonprofit organization, and it's kind of housed under Department of Health Services. Every state has a Silk, an independent living council, and ours focuses a lot on emergency preparedness and emergency management for people with disabilities. So we have conversations like this one. We have speakers that are mostly in emergency management. So that's what we do.
Yeah, an example, that I had never thought about it. I think when we had the heat wave, was that many of our people on oxygen and living up here didn't have air conditioning, or on some of the antipsychotics, and how that was an emergency for them to get air conditioners and and a lot of that was through the health plans.
Yeah, what we're trying to do right now is find backup batteries for people that rely on battery packs to stay alive, really, because if power goes out, the battery dies, insurance won't cover a backup, and they're pretty expensive. So that's one thing we're working on, and just making sure everyone is as prepared as they can be.
Okay. So Kelly, I don't know if you saw the document that Bill was sharing, but Lori, can you send that to her?
Yeah, I
So
will be sending it to everyone that's on the NAPFC. There's been reference to T36, and I just want to be sure that everybody knows that's being hospitalized against your will. I think most of us are familiar with that. So I wonder if the therapist from Hope, or from, I'm sorry, Star has any questions about any of this, because I think you may be new to working in that community, and I think you're not located, you're telehealth provider. You're not located in Flagstaff.
I am located in Flagstaff.
Oh,
Yeah.
my mistake. Oh, good. All
That's
right.
okay. Yeah, I think right now I'm still taking everything in. I am new to this community for sure. So I think I definitely have taken on some emails so I can direct any questions that come up in the future to the appropriate people. Thank you, though.
All right, you're welcome. Okay. Great presentation, Bill. I will be sending the protocol out after we finish this meeting.
I'll go ahead and send you the rest of the ones for the North. I'll send you Navajo, Apache, Mojave, and Coconino.
Okay, all right. We can hit all the angles. So Kathy, did you want to give an extra thank you to Bill, and then I'll do the rest?
sure, thank you. I really, really appreciate your work, Bill. It's slow, but it does take root, and I'm sure you've seen it in other endeavors, and so I'd really admire what you're doing because this is so needed, especially up here. You
My
know,
goal is not to, I don't want to create waves enough to anger people to not discuss things, but I'm a kick the door kind of open person. There's things that systemically we need to fix that have been long-standing in the northern half of the state for a long time. And that's simply all I want to do at this stage in my life is make those long-lasting improvements so that people don't have the struggles and instances that I've had to encounter along with people in my communities. So
yeah,
I greatly appreciate your friendship and being able to bounce questions off you and Lori. I greatly appreciate it.
Okay. Well, to wrap things up today, I just want to remind you of upcoming events. The Northern Arizona Parent Family Coalition meets on Wednesday, the third Wednesday of each month from 1 to 2:30 in the afternoon. Our next meeting is March 25th. I'm sorry. I'm looking at the wrong date, March 20th. Our next Mental Health Monday is on March 25th. And I've been busy rounding up a panel of folks that work in domestic violence shelters throughout northern Arizona to talk about the shelters and how they work and what their interaction and interfaces with behavioral health. So that's coming up. You can always visit namiyavapai.org for future NAMI Yavapai events, and that's what we have for today. So I want to thank you all, and if you have ideas for topics you would like to see presented at Mental Health Monday, please, by all means, let me know.
doing this recording